Forget wabbits, this guy's hunting cyborgs. This is Sega Masters. It's a new year for the Sega Master System as we finally head into 1989. And after experiencing the 1988 holiday season, which was the console's peak in North America, we get to see if Sega does anything to build off it. Our first game of that particular year is Cyborg Hunter, an action run and gun that many gamers outside of Japan never knew was originally based on an anime series. And it may not seem like it, but this card also marks another brief step forward for Sega's console. In the first full year under the Sega-Tonka partnership in 1988, the Master System made a few strides to become somewhat more competitive in the Western video game market, from ditching the boring clip art box covers that plagued the console's early releases in favor of actual colorful illustrations, to finally enlisting an independent third-party publisher to their cause in the US. Granted, it was Parker Brothers, who was also owned by Tonka at the time, and that cart was a conversion of Carmen Sandiego, but it was a start. During the closing months of 1988, they managed to sign their second third-party publisher for their console in the US, and it was a well-known name in the gaming universe, Activision. Indeed, the world's first third-party video game publisher, and one of the few survivors of the mid-1980s video game crash, though in name only. In reality, the Activision of 1989 was a far different entity than the company Alan Miller, David Crane, Larry Kaplan, and Bob Whitehead founded nearly a decade earlier. Back in the formative years of the video game industry, Activision was considered the gold standard of cartridges, publishing numerous hits on the Atari 2600 and other consoles of the day. As the industry began its collapse in 1983, Activision underwent a metamorphosis to weather the shakeout, focusing its attention on computer games and eventually branching out into other types of software, such as productivity titles. By mid-1988, they had rebranded themselves under the corporate title Mediagenic to reflect their vast array of software, both entertainment and otherwise, though their lack of real direction and some unfortunate patent lawsuits would eventually lead to their destruction and subsequent rebirth in the 1990s. In the meantime, with Nintendo spearheading the North American video game revival during the latter half of the 1980s, the Activision name once again began to appear on video game cartridges. Sadly, the results thus far have been less than inspiring to say the least, certainly far removed from the days when Activision usually guaranteed quality. Regardless, Sega signed Activision to their very small stable of North American publishers, though you could say they already had something of a working relationship since we've already seen a pair of Activision's top-selling computer games brought to the console by Sega themselves. And now here we find Activision returning the favor. The company would end up publishing 4 total cartridges for the Master System in the US, 3 of which came in the first month of 1989 and the last one later in the year. The first of Activision's releases for the Master System was a westernized version of a cartridge Sega produced for their console in Japan to tie into an animated series known as Sonic Soldier Borgman. Best described as an animated version of Bandai's Super Sentai franchise, the Borgman series ran for 35 episodes on Nippon Television from April to December 1988, and was followed up with a pair of feature-length films. Sega's Sonic Soldier Borgman game was released in Japan on December 1st, 1988, though this rather plain title screen that just says Borgman might warn you about its possible quality. The cart was subsequently exported to North America and Europe a month later as Cyborg Hunter, but as the show never aired outside of Japan, all references to the anime were unsurprisingly edited out and reskinned for the Western markets, not unlike Black Belt a few years prior. Cyborg Hunter puts you in the titanium boots of Paladin, a bounty hunter who's out to prevent a cyborg uprising led by the evil warlord Vipron by eliminating him and his army from inside his own fortress. Adina here, replacing the Japanese woman from the anime, acts as your contact from the outside world and occasionally chimes in with some hints or information, Metal Gear style. Other than that, you're on your own as you explore the base's 7 areas in search of the equipment necessary for your mission. This corridor serves as the hub to the different levels, each marked A through G, though certain later areas can't be accessed without first obtaining the proper ID cards. And despite this cart being a single player quest, you'll need both controllers to really play this game. Each of the areas consists of a series of long corridors arranged in a grid and connected by elevators in certain places, and it's populated by several types of cyborgs, from the lowly grunts to the tougher chief cyborgs who are your main targets. The only weapons you start out with are your own titanium fists, which means you have to punch your foes out. You can also utilize a Psycho Punch to shoot energy waves at the tougher baddies, yet it consumes your available Psycho power, so you're encouraged to use it sparingly. A rough map of the level is provided for you, as well as a handy tunnel scope radar to alert you of threats further down the corridor, giving you the chance to prepare accordingly. These elevators are used to ascend and descend floors, and that's when you start to discover the cart's quirks. You have to walk to the right side of the screen to work the controls of the D-pad before opening the door with the button. Also, you enter the elevators by pushing up on the D-pad outside the doors, but that's also how you deploy one of your time bombs to damage all the enemies on the screen. If you're not positioned in the correct spot, you could end up wasting a bomb when you're just trying to get inside the car. At least Paladin himself is easy to control and mostly responsive, even with a slight delay when he jumps. Switching between your punches and other items in your inventory is done on the sub-screen, yet the Master System controller lacks a start or select button. So Sega's solution is to make you push one of the buttons on the second controller to access the menu, which can be cumbersome until you somehow get a feel for it. At least it's better than having to use the pause button on the console itself like other Master System cartridges. As your cyborg hunt unfolds, you have the opportunity to obtain new equipment in each area to increase your abilities or aid you in later areas. The shield here allows you to pass through certain electrical fields unharmed, and you can imagine you'll be using it very soon. Once all the chief cyborgs are exterminated and the important items secured, you're allowed to exit the area and return to the hub to head over to the next level. And so the game goes, culminating in a showdown with Vipron in Area G. On the surface, Cyborg Hunter seemingly has the ingredients of at least a solid Metroid-style adventure with some decent visuals and audio to match. You visit different areas to fight bosses, search out power-ups and enable new abilities, as Adina points out here, and gain access to new passages along the way. Even though the actual action is confined to the lower half of the screen, you're still presented with vibrantly colored environments despite a few repetitive backgrounds, and Paladin and the other characters boast some nice looks and smooth animation. The thing is, you'll be hard pressed to believe the monsters you're constantly fighting are actually cyborgs. As far as the sound goes, the effects are just there and nothing offensive except for the beeping sound that alerts you to the approaching chief cyborgs, which can get obnoxious in a short time. A few solid background tunes of varying quality do their job adding to the atmosphere. Once you get past the first impressions, however, it isn't long before you discover how bland and repetitive Cyborg Hunter's gameplay actually is. The game consists of little more than moving from one hallway to the next while knocking off the cyborgs in your path, going up an elevator to the next floor, killing more enemies, and so forth. You're only given one life to complete all 7 levels, as well as 3 continues to keep you going, yet the cart is mostly on the easy side as you can take out most of your foes with little trouble. It can be a little irritating actually hitting them with your fists, since they're always moving or jumping around and often flying right into you, forcing you to constantly shuffle around until you're in the proper spot for your blows to connect. In Area B, you can obtain a ray gun that's somewhat on the weak side, but finally allows you to attack from a distance, making slaying your aggressors much less stressful. As far as the levels themselves go, each of them has a unique look and a unique set of enemies to set them apart from one another, but aren't very exciting overall since they feature very little in the way of actual level design. The only real obstacles that try to impede your progress are beds of spikes that need to be leapt over or bypassed by using the jetpack, which, despite the name, just lets you hover in the air. The lack of any bottomless pits or ledges or such also means no real platforming is required either. Even the hallways that are cloaked in darkness fail to impress, as they don't really conceal anything of note. Paladin and the enemy sprites are all visible, and there's no pits or traps hiding in the shadows to worry about. You can just charge through without even needing the so-called light gun to illuminate your path. In fact, most of the tools you worked so hard to obtain are only good for 1 or 2 uses, after which they'll just sit unused on your inventory screen. Only a couple of the add-ons will get any real mileage from you, such as the Psycho Gun, the most powerful weapon in the game which also requires psycho power to operate. The only time you're really challenged in the game are the few boss fights with whom I'm assuming are characters from the anime that Sega didn't bother reskinning. Sadly, these confrontations aren't very exciting either, just your standard dodging the shots and firing back exercises with easy to discern patterns and very little strategy needed. Defeating the bosses earns you the necessary ID card to access the closed off areas in the hub and also extends your life and psycho power meters. Despite the cart seemingly offering you the option to select your stage at the beginning, you're basically forced into challenging the 7 areas in a linear alphabetical order, as you usually can't succeed in one stage without the special item from the previous area, robbing you of the opportunity to try the levels in a different sequence, which would have added a bit of replayability. Granted, you're allowed to return to the areas you previously completed, yet there's no new secrets or bonus items to discover with your few newfound abilities, giving you no real incentive to explore them again. The only reason you'd want to go back to an earlier level is to collect the scant health and psycho power restorers that can be found in certain locations and endlessly respawn by stepping in and out of the nearby elevators. This ensures you never have to worry about your vitality running out. In the end, I can't really call Cyborg Hunter a bad game. It does provide some competent, slightly entertaining action, and its somewhat unique features do help it stand out from similar 2D action titles, yet the programmers actually make very little use of them and the whole experience just feels half-baked. This game should have been much longer with more exploration, secrets, and at least a password save, but instead the entire game can be completed in just over an hour. And after you defeat Vipron and watch the somewhat disappointing ending, you've seen all there is to this cart and have no reason to play through it again. Overall, Cyborg Hunter ranks as one of those games that's enjoyable the first or second time you play it, but its short completion time and lack of replayability ensures it will ultimately end up back on your shelf before too long.